Hey everybody, it's been a while. Kind of a busy couple of weeks starting out February. Traveling for a week for work for ministry purposes. Came back and then we had to deal with a sewer backup at home, and so things have been a little chaotic for the first couple weeks. So I'm just getting back and then doing these reflections. I'm also changing the name to just calling them devotional reflections because I don't know that I'm always going to be able to land them on a weekend. Don't want to tie it to a calendar as much, just knowing my schedule and the way things go. Anyway, so wanted to share about a couple of weeks ago, a few days ago, I was in my personal reading time. I came upon one of those verses that is always one of those ones that perplexes me, in something that Jesus said. And I think it's partly because of the way I've seen it interpreted, the way I've seen it applied. Um, Really, that for some people, it's been, in some ways, it's been interpreted and even translated to promote the need for an aggressiveness in entering the kingdom of heaven. And that's always been a difficult thing for me to work through and think through. What does that really mean? Because you can see ways that that could be abused as well. And I'm talking about Matthew 11:12, and that's the context where, um, after that John the Baptist had sent, after while he was in prison, John the Baptist had sent some messengers to Jesus, said, "Hey, are you really the person we're waiting for? Are you really this Messiah we're looking for? Or is there somebody else coming along?" And after the messengers go back, Jesus answers their question and they go back. Um, Jesus kind of goes on a little bit more about John the Baptist and his role in the whole story of God's efforts to redeem humanity and bring humanity back into relationship with himself. And um, Matthew 11:12 is the one that I'm particularly focusing on, and I'm intentionally reading it out of the Young's literal translation because I want to try to get as close to literal to the Greek as the resources I have available are without reading it directly out of an interlinear. If you want to get into a deeper discussion on the Greek and things like that, I've got friends I could probably refer you to. I'm pretty basic on this type of stuff, but I wanted to try to read it from a version that I thought at least got as close as possible to what was originally said in the Greek, um, in the translation. And it says, "And from the days of John the Baptist till now, the reign of the heavens doth suffer violence, and violent men do take it by force." And I think that's why I kind of chose this one, is because, like I said, even in the translations, a lot of times our translations have been influenced by a Eurocentric Western theology, when it comes to the translation into English. And sometimes I think that that distorts the meaning in reading for people. Even one of my favorite translations is the New Living Translation. When it comes to this one, it says, "The kingdom of heaven advances forcefully," and it kind of implies that there's this forceful thing going on. And I'm like, no, it's saying the kingdom suffers violence. And I really think when we try to interpret this, we have to think of it in the context of when Jesus was speaking it and the time he was speaking it. Um, you know, at that time, there were a lot of people that were trying to raise up a crowd against the Roman oppression that they were experiencing, and they were leading these violent uprisings, and they were trying to bring back the kingdom of God, the kingdom of David, which they saw as the kingdom of heaven, by beating the Romans. And when I look at that, I don't see this, what Jesus is saying in here, anything being an endorsement for this is how you're supposed to do it. In fact, I think I see him doing the exact opposite, that he's saying all these people keep trying to um, bring about the kingdom of heaven through violence and aggressiveness and rudeness and whatever you want to say. And that's not the way I'm going to proceed with this. In fact, he suffered violence, as the verse even says. And, you also look back, if you look back a few verses before that, when he's talking to the disciples of John the Baptist, the messengers from John the Baptist, he says, I think he recognizes that John's kind of wondering about this, whether or not, he's expecting this mighty warrior Messiah, versus the person that Jesus is appearing to be or starting to look like in the way he approaches ministry. And I think Jesus recognizes that, John's struggling with this too. And he says, blessed are those who don't fall away because of me. That he's saying, I'm not going to be that type of warrior. Unfortunately, I think some people are going to lose faith because they were looking for that and not what I, I actually intended and what God actually intended. And I think we have to look at this in how we live faith in the 21st century in America as well. Particularly, I think sometimes, like I said, a lot of our interpretations of a passage like this kind of come from a Eurocentric, very Roman Empire influenced interpretation. We have to realize that in the West, the institutional church was influenced by the Roman the Roman thinking from the time of Constantine on, and sometimes that had a negative influence in really capturing what Jesus was about. And I've seen you see this in probably today, the mixing of the Bible and political ideology, like we saw, on January 6th, 2021, when people were carrying, you know, King Jesus or President Jesus or vote for Jesus signs while they were storming the Capitol and things like that. I think there was, for some people, there was this sense of we got to take the kingdom of God back. And I think that's what can be damaging to the reality of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And I think we have to look at maybe that the type of kingdom and the type of Messiah Jesus was at that time was the opposite of this aggressive, violent violence, or taking the kingdom by violence, or taking the kingdom aggressively. And he was one who was saying, my way is going to be counter to that violence. And I think as followers of Jesus, we need to think the same way and say, we're not seeking to be people that we see around us, people that are trying to use coercion and violence and aggressiveness and rudeness to make the culture conform to the kingdom of God. And we seek to live a life that is countercultural, that does not resort to these methods, but instead seeks to be people who live the kingdom values and influence the culture around us through these kingdom values without the aggressiveness and the violence that we see in some circles today. So, hey, that's my thoughts. Like I said, it's a verse that I've challenged by often, and I have to think about how do I interpret this? But, I would encourage people to dig deep into it and read it through different translations and see where maybe what God is speaking to you in it, and look at it in the broader context of who we know Jesus to be. So talk to you later. Blessings. Have a good day.